Hello, everyone. So I'd like to start with this song because it's like it is connected with a definite stage of in my journey, and I found myself. And this album is keeping me moving forwards, is keeping me like pushing through. When things happen you don't understand why, when you have no clue or no understanding, and it gets so overwhelmed, and you understand the consequence of this and the central nervous system. So God is your refugee. So he is the only one that he was, is, and will, and he will never change. So we don't want to lose sight of that. So this I'm gonna send I'm gonna send the link in the chat, and we see um, how is the rhythm it change the overwhelmed states, and this like the reach out or the step of understanding what works and what does not work. It When you are in your healing journey, you started to collect this kit of let us say transformation, restoration, rejuvenation over the time, and you understand its impact on your pathophysiology. So it is, you have to be open to know what works and what does not work. The passive approach of waiting that somebody's gonna give me the magic pill or the quick fix, it didn't work and it would never work. It caused like a havoc like, and a cascade, because the person is still, their pathophysiology is on tornado mode. So it's like suppressing what needs to be addressed and ignoring what the root causes, and seeking the superficial or what I am dealing with right now. It's like only dealing with the crust, but the inner layers of the condition, it is left ignored. And because the type of life or um, the developmental stage, the environment, what is your adaptation mechanism, so that it's maladaptive, that it is temporary, it's not long term, and it gives you this escape from discomfort and or this ease, lack of the sense of easiness and flow, and clarity, attenuation, a clear perception, and providing the primitive or the primary understanding of what of your environment, of your body language, and of your interpersonal relationships. Uh, it's um, it's a journey I'm dedicated myself for in understanding the human condition in correlation with the dysregulation of the central nervous system. And the major player of all of this is aggression, and it can show itself, as I talked to in part three, in multiple ways. It can be a regular sociocultural norm, but you do know that is a type of aggression, that is a type of antisocial, that is a type of a red flag behavior we have to pay attention to early, because it accumulate on the immune response, the stress response, the state of the homeostasis is activating the excitotoxicity load and leading to allostatic load and the condition or the manifestation of the disorder or the disease. So it messed up your metabolism in electrobiochemical. It mess up the gene expression, and that's what we see the dynamic between genotype phenotype. My focus now is phenotype because this is the gene environment interaction with all its complex through cross culture and culture intelligence. At the same time, understanding that what is in outside the box is not what really is going on inside the box. Inside the box is like a castle, is fortified, and there is a lot of really old programming to protect, to defend, so it is hard to break down in one incident. So it requires a specific approach so to understand all of that. It is like the lubricant. It is you are once you go, you think that you are way out. You see the same frame, the same like dimension or the same shape. So you don't know where to start or where to go. Did I go here first or not there first? So it creates this long state. If the human is dysregulated, it is what we call it the repetitive detours or the vicious cycle. It is like the design of the infrastructure of the city. That is when all networks work as a functional objective to for specific outcomes. So that is your central nervous system, and that is your somatosensory, that is your peripheral, that is your enteric nervous system, that is your sympathetic, parasympathetic. So you are equipped biologically to handle whatever task in hand. However, the hunter gatherers and the survival of the fittest, it activates the stress response for a short term of time, and then the recovery, and then you go through the eustasis, and that is the balanced state. You go up and down, and then you understand your midline or your baseline of modulation, adaptation, and rest and digest. That is when the environment already okay is there is settlement, there is stability, there is safety, there is trust. So there are components into eustasis to go through it. But when it goes into highway ride, that is when we understand that whatever input comes into the biosystems, it putting the cellular mechanism under too much to handle, confusing the cell language, confusing the mechanisms, confusing the metabolic function they are supposed to do. Cell takes like jobs that they are not designed for, but they compensate. So you have your body biological system compensation mechanisms. So your body is working to try to figure it out. It is the best model to understand teamwork and how survival of the fittest work, how the selection rules works, how the power dynamic works, how the curiosity, the innovation, the creativity, even in aggression. So aggression became like it is not the rights and protesting, and that is the what we say the common cross culture understanding of aggression. That is what it is, and it is like cyclical. It is social modeling and imitation from early childhood. That is how I can get what I want. So it's an end is for a means for an end, or it can be a means of end for a mean. So it is justified. It sometimes many cultures it based on the motivation and intention within the context given of aggressive behavior. It can be promoted, and it can be seen as a source of strength, source of empowerment, source of gaining control, authority, influence, financial gain, or status gain. So it can be multiple, but however, my approach it is from the subjective vulnerable. These are the 20% and 60% women, because they are perceived as weak, as helpless, as some call them sassy, some call them yeah, gullible, what to say, uh, my apology for this word, stupid. uh, so it has with a female gender, it has a negative connotation with perception, behavior, and social culture norms. So being a female can put a specific population under horrendous type of trauma and stress, and it goes unnoticed, and it's gonna be perceived as they cannot handle it. And not understanding the perspective from the perpetrator and the aggressor, the perpetrator, and the victim, how it is from uh, genetically modified and enhanced by the environment and lived experience. And at the same time, from the subjective vulnerable, it is a defense mechanism. It is maladaptive behavior, but however, is it changing the metabolic and the electrobiochemicals over years, especially with a sensitive period of development that is early childhood and adolescence. And this is what makes the tapestry of any community, the strengths of their youth and children. So if they are if their behavior is fear driven, if their behavior is trauma driven or a high toxic input level, a dysregulated central system is gonna invade the alteration of the immune system, of the GI or gastrointestinal GI or gut brain axis, and is gonna mess up with the specific parts of the brain that are designed you for survival, for sometimes for longevity, for the gene expression, for protective from specific diseases. But however, with alteration of all the input through social culture norms, through interpersonal relationships, and toxic emotional and the trauma bleeding, that it leaves like unaddressed or unidentified or swept under the rug because it is too much. No one, and we all understand now the false positivity, that you focus only on the good and keep away the bad, the negative, keep away without addressing it. So, oh, this is something I have to pay attention to. How can I address it? And you can address it from the beginning, from the training models, from early childhood, family, community, and even nations. Because if those who are maladaptive are running on autopilot or running on activating the zombie on the biosystems, and they have joy to harm, or they targeting those who are seen as incapable, unable, and helpless, hopeless, away from their family. They are easy target. They are easy, especially with women or females and girls and women, and can start early. They collect information on you from neighborhood, from friends, from co-workers, from they are on mission to understand how to attack or how to compromise the person in front of them for the benefit of a specific outcomes. And that brings from the perpetrator and aggressor, it brings joy to them. That is how I mentioned in other videos the neuroanatomy and the neurofunction and the structure. So the perpetrator and the victim, they are working from different dynamics, but both are using aggression in a specific task with specific motivation and intention. The perpetrator is, like we said, it is active, it is proactive, it is strategically calculated, and they are smart with that. And no law or justice system have the clear image about this, because it is social, it is people interaction, it is interrelationships, it's part of the research. 60% this year, guys, you have to be aware of this, or over 60% intimate partner relationships. So who you invite into your circle, they become what you want. They become what you want. With a subjective vulnerable, they think they are their savior. They are, oh my goodness, I finally found a way out of all my troubles, but they don't know what they are getting themselves into. They don't understand that their vulnerability is the tool to be manipulated, to be used, to be broken down or be taken down. So we have to pay attention to numbers, but numbers give us like the awareness. You're being informed, being educated, being well aware, raising awareness. That became my first mission, to speak up, spread awareness, and understand that aggression can be seen as everyday subtle behavior. So it doesn't leave any marks, it doesn't leave any like sort of physical, or but it compromises the person internally from electrobiochemistry and over time. And mostly we see chronic illness, psychiatric conditions, and early onset at 7 years old. That is a red flag. That is a red flag between group dynamic, how I understand my boundaries and limitations, how I understand that I am presenting an opportunity for somebody to be used or taken advantage of, how I identify, because you have a responsibility. How can a family together to educate their children on that, and we stop this vicious cycle of being like coming from dysfunctional family, and you are like talking about it everywhere, but you don't know who's going to use this information against you to bring harm and hurt over time. You don't know. You don't know. Majority now, over 70%, over 70% coming from dysfunctional family. Go figure it out. So we all need to work on our load. We need to work on our responsibility and maintain the dignity and integrity of the human being. It is not anymore a question for me, and I'm paying a price for this. So, yes, it's not a question word for now to maintain the unawareness of the group dynamic of culture dynamics and how unintentionally or intentionally harming one another. That is not only physical, that is emotional, psychological, economical, mental, and compromising the quality of life, compromising the even the DNA methylation and alteration of the gene expression and manifestation of disease. And mostly it is a burden, and everybody carry part of this burden. So I'm continuing this today, the part four, and I said aggression is became my fascinating phenomenon to study for over 15 years now. I am still peeling the crust of it because it became like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that this word or this phrase or this behavior, it is it falls under aggression. I didn't know. So that is the awareness. Our ignorance of what health means put us at a disadvantage. Put us at disadvantage, and that is we are harvesting for generations, millennial, Gen X, and baby boomers, and we see it heavily in baby boomers because now we are reaping on what left under the rug unaddressed, and it is survival of the fittest. The jungle, the animal brain. It is the survival of the fittest. It is survival of the group who can get more of and who can lift behind. Um, and that's if we see in the history there are patterns, but we never learn from the history. It's repeating itself, and we're paying a price. We are paying a price. So no one is immune. Technology now is highly double-edged tool because of the justice system. They are trying to combat the harm for the perpetrator, using it to locate, to identify, and to attack. So they are strategically the perpetrator using the technology for their own benefit, using technology, and even you don't know. So technology now, and they become more smarter and smarter in using the technology, even like installing cameras in the victim home, or they call it the CCTV, or the conceivable surveillance system. They do GPS to locate where they are. Um, they are like very smart now, but how come they know you are in this place now? How come they know that you are doing this now? How come no, wake up. We are in the world of technology, and technology can be used for bringing justice or causing harm. So it's a world is not a utopia. Our world is not like the pinky rosy as many choose to. This is their world. There are, but however, sometimes this pinky world can be messed up and ripped apart. So everyone has a responsibility Everyone has to understand how I raise my awareness of human behavior. It is not only it is not only what is published in the social media. It is a tool or part of what is going inside the box. So today I am navigating another part of aggression, manifestation of insulin resistance, and its role of metabolic dysfunction, personality clusters A, B, and C, how this integrate with it, and gene environment interaction or phenotype, and that is my focus: aggression from neuroendocrine and phenotype approach, and it is very broad. Every research now is dealing with part of it, some dealing with DNA methylation, some dealing with genetic modifications, or I read an article now by NH is the lay foundation for potential gene editing for therapy for late onset Tay Sachs, and that is an engineering genetic disorder. And so technology, as I mentioned, it can be used for the benefit of human subject, and it can be used to bring harm to the human subject. We're going to identify some of the red flags we want to look for or we want to be aware of, because you may experience many of them or some of them. So you just bring the awareness into the piece of understanding that um, our I would like to say it. You are, as a human, you are an asset for the perpetrator to feed on. You are an asset to continue the vicious cycle of tormenting, bringing trauma, stress, sleep disturbances, and all goes internally and invisible. It is invisible. We have to look now to chronic conditions from invisibility, and what dynamics, what contexts are integrating cross culturally and from culture intelligence and emotional intelligence. Yes, however, you require the sociocultural intelligence awareness, and that was the top edge now of many sophisticated, very tactical fields, that we would like to understand the sociocultural intelligence, because the complex environment is presenting us with different parameters. However, we have to understand what is inside the box. So I am talking about from the neuroendocrine endocrine approach. For example, we understand, have you correlated aggression with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular? Have you, or Alzheimer disease or Parkinson's? Have you tied these diseases to aggression? Uh, I don't know. So this is another area I would like to push the awareness and open the conversation to understand that aggression can have many manifestations in our life, and no one is only focusing on physical aggression or the damage. And this is the latest. There are other things. There are microaggressions. There is passive aggression. There is reactive aggression. There is a lot of behaviors that took place, and that is the last phase: the physical, the property damage, the taking down specific individuals, the silencing of the same individuals, the excommunication. That is the last. but the target, they are not aware, and they are using this for their disadvantage. So, have you connected aggression with insulin resistance? So let's have a brief. That is not everything. I'm trying to put all the matrices together, and you see the phenomena from the big picture approach. From the big picture approach is not only one single factor, or my family has it, it runs in the family, or something like that. It is my genetic. But what caused your genetic to take place? It is all the input we are taking in our life on a daily basis. So I am thinking about insulin is not just a peripheral metabolic hormone. It is a neuromodulatory role in the brain, especially in the hypothalamus, amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and hippocampus. We understand this network in aggression across the way, in across all disorders, obesity, asthma. They are like the main the main players. Master players are all the biomarkers. So these regions are central to impulse control, emotional regulation, reward processing, aggression modulation, insulin resistance in the central nervous system, like dopamine turnover and receptor sensitivity, serotonin regulation, HB axis reactivity, and more cortisol under stress. Neuroinflammation that is crossing the blood-brain barrier. And these changes heighten aggression, impulsivity, and stress sensitivity. HB axis dysregulation, insulin resistance, leading to hyperinsulinemia, elevated cortisol, and altered glucocorticoid receptor gene. Glucocorticoid receptor sensitivity gene. Cortisol dysregulation is linked with reactive aggression and poor emotion regulation. Inflammatory signaling. So we have insulin resistance, elevated interleukin 6, tumor necrosis alpha, and C-reactive protein. They are the master players in all of the disorders we have been talking about. Neuroinflammation affects microglia in aggression regulating circuits. Cytokines can cross the blood-brain barrier and modify synaptic plasticity, reducing behavioral inhibition. That is when we say the excitatory like cortisol, glutamate, histamine, and we have the inhibitory like GABA and acetylcholine, and So monoamine imbalance, insulin resistance, alters dopamine and serotonin. Serotonin increased impulsivity and aggression. Dopaminergic dysregulation, reward driven or psychotic aggression. One day, a friend asked me, "Do you know anything about insulin resistance?" I was still early in my master degree. I wasn't specialized yet in what I need to do. I was navigating sleep, I was navigating stress, but all still singular entity. I was navigating personality disorders and other chronic conditions relating to diabetes, cardiovascular, and dementia. So I was like still navigating that. I see what I want to focus on, want to focus on, but aggression in the back scene of me, because I see its impulses in everything, evil, subtle, or and as we say, subtle, or so declarative, so obvious for everyone. So I said, no, something is, mechanisms are running. There are patterns are running. I want to understand this. That is when I contacted multiple universities and I said, I want to work in this from neuroendocrine, some work still in personality disorders from personality perspective, and DSM-5, that is it, the mental and the mental and the psychological classification of the disorder, but yet the neuroendocrine pathway, that is what I would like. And I don't know, I'm still communicating and interacting. Say it's bull and bush uh, um, journey. However, I was still pushing through and still communicating and sending messages, and I am doing my videos just to explain what is behind what is the unseen. Open the box and understand your electrobiochemistry on molecular and cellular level, metabolic function and dysfunction. So, what is the cytokines can cross the blood-brain barrier and modifying the synaptic plasticity, reducing behavior inhibition. Insulin resistance alters the dopamine and serotonin. It decreases serotonin, increased impulsivity and aggression, increased dopaminergic dysregulation, reward-driven or psychotic aggression. So we have the genetic predisposition or implications as well. Insulin resistant, insulin resistance sensitivity 1 and 2, insulin receptor substrate, altered expression, poor synaptic signaling. FKBP5, glucocorticoid receptor regulation, dysregulation, aggression, stress response, SLC, and I mentioned the genetic predisposition multiple times across the series of on aggression. SLC6A4, serotonin transporter, epigenetic modulation, impulsive aggression. MAOA, monoamine oxidase A, low activity variant, higher aggression. LEB or leptin. Leptin was one of my research in my master degree was the sleep disturbances. So I did this. I worked on leptin. So energy regulation, satiety, leptinemia, inflammation, and aggression. DNA methylation changes. We see it. It is a cascade. It's a cluster. Nothing works solo. It's an orchestra within your body. Once the input is making the right formula, BDNF gene, lower expression, impaired neural plasticity. NR3C1, glucocorticoid receptor, hypermethylation, poor stress buffering. MAOA promoter, hypermethylation, increased aggression in males. Methylations can be influenced by diet, stress, and obesity. And I took with a video of smoking, obesity, and ACEs with a correlation for this and their impact on the DNA methylation and demethylation. Children with metabolic syndrome and aggression, studies in adolescents with obesity and insulin resistance showed elevated hostility, internalizing behaviors. High leptin and C-reactive protein correlated with aggression across the scores of the study. Let us see type 2 diabetes and neuropsychiatric symptoms. Type 2 diabetes patients often exhibit mood instability, increased irritability, and aggression, correlated with insulin resistance, central inflammation, and HB axis dysfunction. For polycystic ovarian syndrome and adrenergic aggression, women with polycystic ovarian syndrome often insulin resistant. Elevated testosterone increased the dominance related aggression. mood dysregulation, and impulsivity linked to central nervous system insulin resistance. The phenotype, the gene environment interaction, nothing works solo. So, using the functional MRI and behavioral tests like go, no, go. So, it's like it's a game from behavioral neuroscience, like go, no, go. And we see that the confusion and the sympathetic and parasympathetic response, the limbic response, when and the confusion with response again, you're gonna show a lot, and then the brain activity and the blood flow in specific regions. Aggression paradigms look for reduced prefrontal inhibitory control and hyperactive amygdala. Metabotyping or behavioral clusters. We have patients, there's are multiple categories, patients with HOMA-IR levels, cytokines profile, cognitive and aggression profile. So these are the testings that is taking place to present a comprehensive approach in understanding the downstream of the motivation, the attention, and whether it is reactive, if it is proactive, and exactly what is happening is compromising the biosystem and the GI. It has its influence in multiple pathways. Impulsive selective versus instrumental persistence aggression. Impulsive reactive is more metabolically or neuroendocrinologically linked. Aggression can be considered a neurobehavioral phenotype of insulin resistance, especially when there is central nervous system insulin resistance. Inflammatory, monoaminergic, and HP axis dysregulation are present. Epigenetic modification, for example, methylation of stress and the neurotransmitter related genes, amplify behavior expression. Biomarkers, we have interleukin 6, HOMA-IR, methylation status of MAOA, NR3C1, targeting insulin sensitivity like metformin, exercise, and diet to reduce aggression. From psychoneuroendocrinology, and this is part of within my specialization as well, need to integrate care between neuroendocrinologists, psychiatrists, and neurologists. And I put ourselves like health psychology, because we are integrated within behavioral medicine, psychology, and the biochemistry of the behavior. So we are theoretically trained behaviorists. So, HOMAIR, or homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance, is a clinical and research tool used to quantify insulin resistance and beta cell function, that is immune response, based on fasting glucose and insulin levels. It is a mathematical model. Now we have lots of computational models to understand the algorithms of the downstream pathways. Models that reflect how effectively insulin is working to regulate glucose in the body. Especially in early detection of insulin resistance, especially early childhood, from 7 years old till 12, till 16, till 19, we care for the sensitive period of development. This is when a change in the hormonal and the neural connections and the long-term potentiations. Early detection of insulin resistance, monitoring metabolic syndrome, assessing risk for type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and NAFLD, or cardiovascular diseases, and or non-alcoholic fatty liver disorders, NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disorders, and this is from oxidative stress and the rupture of endothelial tissue and the lipopolysaccharides and the proliferations of the fat cells. So the body, it's automatically that exaggerate and proliferate through the body. Even neuropsychiatric conditions like depression and aggression. And aggression is my full in focus. HOMA-IR estimates how much insulin is required to maintain fasting glucose levels. A higher value suggests the body needs more insulin to keep glucose in check, a sign of insulin resistance. Normal low HOMA-IR is less than 1.5, borderline 1.5, 2.9. High insulin resistance is higher than 2.9 and or higher than 3.5 in some populations. The cutoff varies slightly based on population, age, sex, ethnicity, and lab standards. So it depends on where they are, their age, their sex, their gender, their ethnicity, their race, and other goes when huge of lifestyle and sociocultural norms. Because many times the maladaptive can drive the bad behavior that impact the biosystems over the long term. The mechanisms behind HOMA-IR in healthy individuals: insulin promotes glucose uptake into muscle, adipose tissue. Liver suppresses glucose output. Insulin resistance tissue fail to respond to insulin. Pancreas compensate by producing more insulin. That is what we say. The team want to help each other, but you don't know what type of help or compensation is going to take place. It can harm and damage based on the input. This leads to hyperinsulinemia even in fasting state, because the liver already became overwhelmed. No, not too much, refusing more insulin, and the brain is not it's too much, no more. So it's blockage. So where to go? It's going to find itself in other ways. Over time, beta cell dysfunction can develop type 2 diabetes. So, the implication here used in metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes mellitus, polycystic ovarian syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, aggression, mood disorders, and emerging research shows that insulin resistance may influence behavior. That is our core training as health psychologists from behavioral neuroscience, psychoneuroimmunology. I didn't know what to say. So it's the neuroanatomy and physiology, the microbiology, all of this. I went through all of it. So let us see. HOMA-IR only valid in fasting state, not accurate in type 1 because there is a genetic predisposition in type 1 diabetes or patients on oxygenous insulin. Doesn't reflect postprandial insulin sensitivity, less accurate in extreme glucose or insulin values. Population-specific thresholds are required. Emerging research has linked central insulin resistance, reflected and directed by peripheral insulin resistance via HOMA-IR, cognitive impairment, aggression and impulsivity, depression and anxiety, alter dopamine and serotonin signaling. This supported that HOMAIR is not just a metabolic marker, but may reflect behavioral and neurological risks. So behavioral neuroscience is and psychoneuroimmunology heavy on that, and this is a direction for molecular psychiatry, for precision medicine, for personalized medicine, to look deeper on molecular and cellular level with the metabolic dysfunction. Full form homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance, fasting insulin, time fasting glucose divided by 405. And this calculate the units of glucose and insulin for the unit are subtracted or added. Interpretation: higher equal more insulin resistance. Normal range less than 1.5, varies by source and population. Main uses screening and monitoring of insulin resistant metabolic syndrome, polycystic ovarian syndrome. HOMA beta cell function, quickie insulin sensitivity, adiponectin or leptin. These are all the markers or biomarkers. HOMAIR is a simple, cost-effective, and widely used as a tool to assess insulin resistance from fasting labs. It serves as a bridge between metabolic health and neuroendocrine function, making it valuable for both endocrine and psychiatric research and care. There are multiple case studies, like a 16 years old female presented with mood instability, episodes of impulsive aggression, school fights, family conflicts. Her obesity BMI is 33, so that means like she is in the range of obesity. So that increases the susceptibility of aggressive behavior or overreactive because of the dysregulation of the central nervous system. Irregular menstrual cycles suggesting polycystic ovarian syndrome, family history of type 2 diabetes, all this go back to aggression, so name it. Here psychiatrists noted a strong pattern of reactive aggression, leading to referral for metabolic evaluation. Look for the zombies. Fasting glucose 102 milligram, and the preference is so 70 to 99, fasting insulin 23, and the required range is 2 to 20. So she's high on both fasting glucose and fast insulin. With calculation of HOMAIR is higher than 5.8. So this is a direct indicator or a significant indicator of insulin resistance. Patient with aggression was hypothesized to be neurobehavioral fallout of central nervous system insulin resistance, with studies showing that insulin resistance linked to emotional dysregulation and aggression. Giving the patient high HOMA insulin resistance, further evaluation was done to compare it with other markers. So working with the biomarkers is so essential, but however, what drives all these mechanisms is another. This is the phenotype gene environment interaction. There are other testing for insulin resistance and the confirmation or the However, it is a tool that is expensive and time consuming and impractical for some settings. It's clamp or euglycemic hyperinsulinemic clamp, a gold standard. It maintains a constant insulin infusion and measures the glucose needed to maintain euglycemia. The neuroendocrinologists and psychiatrists initiate metformin and low glycemic load diet. BMI decreased to within 6 months to 29. HOMA-IR dropped to 3 point. So this was a clinical intervention for the case. Significant reduction in aggression scores. CBCL externalizing the scores, improved ministerial regularity. This supported the view of metabolic dysfunction contributes to neurobehavioral symptoms like aggression. From a neuroendocrine standpoint, aggression can emerge from behavioral phenotype influenced by insulin resistance through a web of metabolic, molecular, and epigenetic dysfunction. Insulin resistance, particularly central insulin resistance, as the frontal, impact brain regions involved in emotion regulation, reward, and impulse control, such as the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, hypothalamus. These changes not only impair cognitive processing, but also promote aggressive and impulsive behaviors. For central insulin resistance, we have it widely distributed in the brain, particularly in the hypothalamus and the limbic structure. Insulin signaling in the brain regulates not only energy balance, but also mood, reward, behavior, and stress response. If states are insulin resistance, this signaling is blunted, leading to dopamine dysfunction, altered reward and motivation system, HB axis dysregulation, resulting in elevated cortisol, chronic stress response, increased neuroinflammation through upregulated cytokines, interleukin 6, and tumor necrosis alpha. These alterations are implicated in aggressive and impulsive behavior, especially when compounded by obesity or high systemic inflammation. Gene expression and insulin resistance. We have, as I mentioned, the insulin resistance is some alteration in the expression of these genes affect the neurotransmitter balance and stress reactivity, which are the core aggressive phenotype in insulin resistance. DNA methylation, insulin resistance interacts with early life stress to epigenetically modify key gene regulating mood and behavior. Notable methylation changes include BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Methylation reduced expression, impairing synaptic plasticity and emotional regulation. NR3C1 glucocorticoid receptor hypermethylation blunts negative feedback on HB axis, increasing stress vulnerability. MAOA, a hypermethylation in males is associated with increased aggression, especially under metabolic stress. These modifications are environmentally sensitive, meaning factors like diet, chronic stress, and obesity can influence gene expression via epigenetic pathways. There is a longitudinal study in adolescents with obesity and high HOMA-IR scores higher than 3 points. Elevated externalizing behavior, aggression, impulsivity were significantly associated with elevation of C-reactive protein and interleukin 6 levels. And interleukin 6 is in Parkinson's as well. These adolescents also showing lower prefrontal cortices activation on the functional magnetic resonance imaging or fMRI during inhibitory control task. So when you have the intervention task oriented with fMRI, you understand the pathways and what is inhibitory and excitatory taking place. Women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, characterized by insulin resistance and hyperandrogenism, show increased irritability and aggression. Studies found that metformin not only improved the insulin sensitivity but also reduced aggression scores and improved the mood in polycystic ovarian syndrome patients. Phenotype aggression in the context of metabolic function requires integrating behavioral, metabolic, and neuroimaging. Behavioral phenotype increased impulsive reactive. This is from the victim and the target. It is a reactive aggression. It is defensive aggression. So, but this defensive overreactive aggression, unfortunately, it altered the electrobiochemistry. So it is not a win-win battle. Everyone has a load on each of the aggressor and the targets. So it is not a healthy dynamic or a healthy. So we would like to understand what are the red flags I have to identify, and how can I put my boundaries, because I understand this its effect on my health on long term. And this starts early, from early childhood. Increased impulsive reactive aggression in high insulin resistant individuals disconnect from planned instrumental aggression, because planned instrumental aggression, this is a proactive aggression that is the most high uh, dangerous, callous, unemotional, lack of remorse, and that is instrumental, strategic, and it is calculated over time. They understand when to collect information, when to approach, when to attack, and unfortunately, that is in their neurofunction and structure. But you have to identify this subtle, write the dates, write the incident, document. Everybody's saying now document. Understand the behavioral patterns across a year, 2 years. Understand that and start to educate yourself. Is this normal, or is this, especially when you feel something is not right? Something is not right because something else is taking behind the scene and you are not aware of, and you presented an opportunity for the aggressor to take advantage of. Their neurofunction and structure is completely different. We see metabotyping, or insulin resistant subtypes, identifies by HOMA, insulin resistance, leptin, and inflammatory markers. Neuroimaging decreased activation in dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and ventromedial regions in insulin resistance. Subjects during emotional conflict tasks. These approaches help clarify how systemic metabolic dysfunction translates into brain level dysregulation and aggressive behavior. Aggression as a manifestation of insulin resistance is a complex neuroendocrine phenomena. It includes central insulin signaling impairment, altered gene expression and neurotransmitter activity, epigenetic reprogramming under metabolic stress, real world manifestation in clinical populations like adolescents, polycystic ovarian syndromes, and diabetics. Understanding this in a relationship open the door for targeted interventions such as insulin sensitizing medications, metformin, anti-inflammatory diets, stress regulation therapies. These may help address not only metabolic health but also mood and behavioral dysregulation. Let us see the other phase of aggression, hyperlipidemia, because of the heightened stress response, oxidative, it was turned into chronic stress, oxidative stress, and reverse of the homeostasis into a bad way. So it's like the tornado in a bottle, impact on hyperlipidemia, neuroinflammation, and aggression from neuroendocrine and phenotypic approach. Hyperlipidemia, a metabolic condition characterized by elevated levels of cholesterol and triglycerides, has increasingly, and in women, it's starting in the belly, in the abdomen, in the belly area. You're gonna see a lot of fat started to accumulate. Understand that. You check your cortisol, you check your stress, you check your biomarkers, especially interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, C-reactive protein, BDNF. So there are you have to check them, because this understand that you are acting from survival, not thriving, not parasympathetic rest and digest. Your cellular is carrying the adaptation of stress 24/7. So the cell is acting from, this is the normal case, it's 24/7 survival. This is not you originally biologically is designed to, but the modern uh, 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 I don't know how to say it. People became so innovative in harming one another, including aggression and impulsive behavior. From neuroendocrine perspective, hyperlipidemia contributes to systemic and central inflammation, which disrupts neural circuits involved in mood regulation, impulse control, and social behavior. Therefore, it outlines the neuroendocrine mechanisms, molecular and downstream pathways, and phenotype expressions of aggression associated with hyperlipidemia and neuroinflammation. And this is every lab, because it's based on time, funding, the team, the skills, the technology, all of this has to take place to understand the specific mechanism from downstream pathways on its effect on molecular and cellular mechanism, and correlation with neuroendocrine mechanisms. So it takes effort, it takes time, and you have to identify your target population, at least 100 participants. So that is when your study is valid, 100 participants. And they are putting all the criteria of inclusion within the study. Phenotypic expression of aggression associated with hyperlipidemia and neuroinflammation. Hyperlipidemia and systemic metabolic stress. Hyperlipidemia, when we say systemic, this is your cellular reading, this is the norm. I'm going to act from this, and what is heightened in the pro-inflammatory cytokines. So therefore, other mechanisms are taking place based on the formula given. Hyperlipidemia results in increased circulating LDL, that is the bad cholesterol, triglycerides, and often oxidize the lipids. And we say oxidative. Uh, that is not a healthy state, and not it's a metabolic dysfunction. In stroke, cardiovascular, diabetes, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorders, cancer. I always say, do you understand your metabolic dysfunction? What are the master players? And everybody say, what are you talking about? Or I am out. So what are you talking about? So here. So I became the crazy, or the person that they are not okay. They are talking about what they are talking about, and causing and interfering in things that they shouldn't interfere in. So it became like I didn't know my boundaries. I take responsibility for that. I thought that when knowledge, when it is not used, or in it, Knowledge is the source of education. It has to be the regular pattern of the family, community, individual, and everything. So it's a collective. It is a grassroots, or it started from the bottom, and then you establish a healthy partnership with your practitioners, and you understand what type of conversation can be led, what type of treatment, what best approach, what works, and what, so you can build an informed decision. You can build a in genetic predisposition. Yes, we have genetic counselors, but however, are they in every practice? Behavior specialists, are they in every practice? So these are the people that talking about the root causes, and immunologist, endocrinologist. So all these people looking at the root causes from the functionality of the downstream pathways. And then the behaviors comes to see the map and understand the master players and how can they be modulated through specific interventions. It takes a whole village. It's not one person. It's not one specialty as well. It takes a village. Triggering systematic inflammation via activation and toll-like receptors, TLRs, on immune cells. Promote secretion of pro-inflammatory cytokines, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, elevated levels of C-reactive protein, a marker of cardiovascular and systemic inflammation. And I think in majority now C-reactive protein, and COVID contributed to that. We know it. That was used in COVID, the level of inflammation. So, and that's why COVID correlated highly with cardiovascular strokes and neuro changes. And yeah, so it can accelerate when the zombies are taking place already. So. COVID accelerated this process of apoptosis and shutting down of systems. So at COVID, it was a teachable moment, a teachable event because of the technology and the advancement in science and the increase of the level of education. People started to see the epidemics in a whole different lens. It changes how people behave, act, interact. It changed a lot of things. But for certain people, they don't. It changed, and that is when the neurofunctional structure come take place, and they're who they really are. And we have to understand that the only responsible is you, and the one is gonna inform you is you. You take the responsibility to educate, to inform, to be aware, and build your grit or build your resiliency through valid information. Valid information. Lipid-induced inflammation compromises blood-brain barrier integrity, allowing, and now the genetically engineered, we call it bioterrorism. It targets individuals like children, elderly, because they don't have the capacity to fight for this yet. And that is the another double sword of how you use your science, how you use your knowledge. Is it to the benefit for the humanity of harm and causing harm to the humanity? So it's a legal and ethical approach as well. So it's another part of our reality. So it's not only not only the technology misuse, not only the science misuse, but other perspective. And this is all goes to cross-culture intelligence, that what type of life I want. Allowing inflammatory molecules and lipid metabolites to enter the central nervous system. Microglia activation, and there is microglia activation panel test. It can be done releasing neurotoxic substances, increased oxidative stress, disruption of dopaminergic and serotonergic pathways linked to emotional regulation. HB axis, chronic inflammation from hyperlipidemia increase HB axis activation, leading to elevated, and this is through fMRI and lab works for the biomarkers. Elevated cortisol levels, excess cortisol impairs the prefrontal cortex function. Executive, this is a compromise, that is the distraction. Perpetrator caused distress on the target, that increase cortisol, that blocks the prefrontal cortex, that impair the sound decision. So it causes paralysis, or it causes the shut or the blockage of the prefrontal cortex. Enhance amygdala activity, threat sensitivity, promotes impulsive and reactive aggression. Cytokines like interleukin or the pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin 1 beta, interleukin interleukin um, interleukin 6 and interleukin 1 beta now is, so it's biomarker in endometriosis. So it's another, and what I I have the hypothesis this is ACEs, trauma, oxidative stress, and predisposition. So interfere with serotonin synthesis by degrading tryptophan via the kynurenine carrion pathways, or KN pathway, dopamine metabolism and receptor sensitivity, reduce the serotonin and dopamine are generally linked with irritability, aggression, and poor impulse control. And this is what we see, like if you see like in schools, in community, this is hypervigilant, impulsiveness, irritability, aggression. Understand that this is not only what you see. Look for the biomarkers. Look for the neuroimaging. Understand that you say, I would like to work with these zombies inside me. I would like to work with them. I would like to identify them. I'd like to change the lifestyle around it. And this you dampen, and then you raise awareness. Are you acting from reactive or active response or proactive? Because the brain imaging is going to show everything. Inflammatory epigenetics, hyperlipidemia promotes DNA methylation, changes in gene regulating immune response and mood. And we see higher rates in autoimmunity, higher rates in cancer, higher rates in genetic mutation and predisposition in the fetus from the placenta from the first trimester and the 10 weeks of the development of the neural tube. We see all of that, all this accumulation. It is not addressed, it is left behind. Understand your master players, understand what you need to ask for, and you would like to understand this is not your body is aging or your family. These are a specific formula taking place based on the phenotype, the gene environment interaction, and then you have the foundation, you have the seed for it, so it grows. So histone modifications, so we said histone and DNA methylation and DNA methylation and histone modifications and non-coding RNA, and this is, I mentioned it in obesity, in ACEs, in smoking, and asthma. Master players They are, but what your predisposition for a specific disease, that what differentiate from one person to the other when we say differentiational factors. Histone modifications and non-coding RNA also influence microglia gene expression, which is key in aggression response to metabolic stress. Certain polymorphisms heighten vulnerability to aggression in the presence of hyperlipidemia. APOE4, that is epigenetic, so associated with both hyperlipidemia and cognitive emotional dysregulation. MOAAL, low activity variant linked to impulsive aggression, particularly under environmental stress. And I mentioned the study of the enrichment environment for some of the clinical trials compared with deprived environments, providing the children with all things that facilitate the homeostasis and the healthy neurodevelopment, comparing it with deprivation of other children, and they saw the alteration of the neurofunction structure and specific metabolic dysfunctions. So individuals with hyperlipidemia often exhibit impulsive reactive aggression, low frustration tolerance, increased hostility and emotional liability. This phenotype is more prominent in individuals with comorbid, that is high inflammatory cytokines, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, obesity. A neuroimaging phenotype, fMRI studies show the hyperlipidemia and related inflammation are linked to reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, higher cortisol, higher inhibition of the prefrontal cortex. Inhibitory control, increased amygdalic reactivity, emotional resilience, because higher stress. So we have high reactive, highly reactive sensitive immune response and high reactive stress response. Decrease the functional connectivity between limbic and prefrontal regions. So in cross-sectional studies, we have the longitudinal, we have the clinical trials, we have cross-sectional studies as well. We have multiple studies. This is part of my undergrad health studies. So what type of study are we going to do, and what is your target population, and what intervention can be done? So in a cross-sectional studies in 312 mid-aged adults with metabolic syndrome, higher LDL and C-reactive protein levels correlated significantly with elevated aggression scores on the Peri aggression questionnaire. So that's one of the tools. Poor performance on executive function tasks, increased interleukin-6 levels in cerebrospinal fluid. Some of the interventions with statins and omega-3, because they are older adults or middle-aged adults, there is a allostatic load already. So it is management. So it's not prevention. For early childhood and adolescence, that is highly preventive approach. Statins and omega-3 fatty acids not only lower lipids, but also reduce aggression scores in some clinical trials. In a study done at the year 2021. So it's a recent. It takes like decades till the understanding reach a level of community integration or argumentation of the process of prevention. Until then, we have to learn. Anti-inflammatory diets like Mediterranean now is the top because of its variety and its like amino acids and its healthy fatty acids. protein, lean protein. It based heavily on lean protein. Is like highly recommended in many practices right now in across the chronic conditions, psychiatric conditions. Mediterranean is like brings this balance in the homeostasis, are associated with improved mood regulation and reduced aggression in at-risk populations. From neuroendocrine and the systems biology perspective, this is from as well from neuropsychoimmunology. Hyperlipidemia contributes to neuroinflammation and disrupts brain function, fostering conditions like aggression, aggressive behavior. These effects are mediated through inflammatory cytokines, hormonal imbalance like cortisol, epigenetic regulation, and mood-related genes. Understanding this pathway is essential for developing targeted treatment strategies that address both metabolic health and behavioral regulation. With every integration of all the biosystems and the cellular and molecular mechanisms, I bring the piece of DNA methylation and oxidative stress. DNA methylation, and DNA methylation now is highly in neurological disorders. We see it in Messina gravis, multiple sclerosis, ALS. It is highly now, and this the cell is put under high stress mechanisms over long-term time. And it depends on the central nervous regulation from the beginning, how much you can handle. The started to affect the muscle, it started to affect the musculoskeletal, is the immune system. It bring havoc into especially women. And we would like to open the conversation for women health on a different level, on molecular and cellular level, not from organ system. DNA methylation and epigenetic modification involving the addition of the methyl group to cytosine residues in DNA plays a crucial role in gene expression regulation and genomic stability. Oxidative stress, defined as imbalance between reactive oxygen species production and antioxidant defenses, can induce DNA damage and alter epigenetic pattern, including DNA methylation. Research suggests that oxidative stress impacts DNA methylation through several mechanisms. Oxidative damage to DNA bases, especially 5-methylcytosine, can lead to hypomethylation or apparent methylation patterns. Reactive oxygen species can interfere with function of DNA methyltransferases or DNMTS enzymes responsible for maintaining and establishing methylation markers. A change in methylation induced by oxidative stress have been implicated in the pathophysiology of various diseases, including cancer, neurodegenerative disorders, and chronic inflammatory conditions like cardiovascular or asthma. Thus, oxidative stress and DNA methylation are intricately linked to influencing gene regulation and cellular function and contributing to disease development and progression. DNA methylation and oxidative stress, and I am bringing another piece to the layer of aggression, personality, also the cluster personalities. We have cluster A, B, and C, and that is in DSM-5 of Diagnostic Statistical Manual, edition 5 or version 5. That is the last one. Yeah, last year, yeah. We're using it to compare because we would like to combine DSM-5. We would like the pathophysiology to get into this manual. So the integration with the pathophysiology and psychopathology, they have to be hand in hand. And there has to be crosstalks between disciplines, how to integrate this with that. It's a huge task. It takes a nation to do that. So that's why I'm bringing aggression, DNA methylation, oxidative stress, and personality disorders from epigenetic and neurobiological perspective on cluster A, B, and C. And I said the integration of attachment theory as well. It's all together. It's a multidisciplinary. It's not nothing happen in an island or in isolation. Everything has a matrix. Everything occur in a matrix. Nothing happens solo. So personality disorders or BDs, particularly those categorized in cluster A, odd or eccentric, B, dramatic, emotional, C, anxious, fearful, have a multifactorial etiologies involving genetics, neurobiological, and environmental influences. And so this is on the American Psychiatric Association 2013. Recent advances highlights the pivotal role of epigenetic mechanisms, especially DNA methylation, in modulating gene expression linked to stress response, neurodevelopment, behavioral phenotype characteristics of personality disorders. Oxidative stress arises when the generation of reactive oxygen species overwhelms the antioxidant defenses system, resulting in cellular and molecular damage in the brain. Excessive reactive oxygen species can disrupt neural function and plasticity, pathways implicated in personality disorders pathophysiology. Oxidative stress can also alter DNA methylation patterns through damaging methylated cytosines and interfering with DNA methyltransferases or DNMTS activity, influencing the availability of methyl donors via oxidative depletion of glutathione, and I mentioned glutathione before, and other cofactors, leading to apparent hyper or hypomethylation in gene regulation and hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, neurotransmitter systems, and synaptic plasticity. Studies reveal that altered DNA methylation patterns correlate with personality traits disorders. In cluster B, personality disorders, notably borderline personality disorder or BPD, methylation changes in stress-related gene like NR3C1, glucocorticoid receptor sensitivity gene, and FKBP5 have been linked to childhood trauma exposure and emotional dysregulation. And I mentioned them as biomarkers in other videos. Cluster A disorders, that's schizoval personality disorder, show epigenetic modulation in genes related to dopamine signaling and neurodevelopment. Cluster C personality disorder may involve methylation shifts affecting serotogenic pathways, potentially influencing anxiety and fear-based symptoms. Attachment disruption, especially insecure or disorganized pattern of attachment, are frequent in personality disorder, are tightly linked to early life stress or ELS. ELS can induce persistent oxidative stress and epigenetic alterations, impacting neural circuits, governing emotion regulation, and interpersonal function. So when you say they don't listen, they don't respect, they are hypervigilant, they cannot sit still, they are disrespectful. My apology. There is a tornado in the bottle. That is what the body's doing the normal. The right mechanisms is not in place, and the wrong formula is taking place. DNA methylation changes in attachment-related genes, OXTR or oxytocin receptor gene, influences social cognition and affiliative behavior. Oxidative stress mediated epigenetic modifications may exacerbate attachment insecurities by impairing neuroendocrine regulation, such as HB axis and neuroinflammation pathways. Understanding the interaction between oxidative stress and DNA methylation in personality disorders open the open the open the research pathway or the the investigative pathway to biomarker development. Epigenetic markers of oxidative stress might aid early detection of personality disorder risk and symptom severity. Targeted therapies, antioxidant treatments, and epigenetic modulators may complement psychotherapy to improve outcomes. Psychotherapy, the talk therapy, is processing these unwanted discomfort and emotions. The thoughts, the racing thoughts, the disbelief or the negative the negative models of thinking. So you complement it with antioxidant treatments. Personalized medicine integrating genetic, epigenetic, and environmental data may tailor interventions to individual profile. And this is when we understand the classification of DSM-5. We would like these biomarkers, we would like these master players and more into pathophysiology or psychopathology of the disease. I understand that this is heavily in forensic, this is heavily in clinical, this is heavily in homicide or domestic violence, but we would like from preventive, so we would like to start from the baseline, early intervention or prevention. So, uncorrelated, the association with antisocial behavior and conduct disorders, impulsivity, in correlation with DNA methylation, oxidative stress, within the approach of neuroendocrine and attachment theory. Antisocial behavior and conduct disorders, often marked by impulsivity, aggression, and role breaking, are prevalent in childhood and adolescence and can persist into adulthood as antisocial personality disorder. These behaviors are influenced by complex interactions between genetic predisposition, neurobiological systems, environmental exposure, and epigenetic modification. Emerging research suggests that oxidative stress may contribute to the neurobiological underpinning of impulsive and antisocial behaviors. Oxidative damage affects brain regions critical for impulse control and emotional regulation, such as prefrontal cortex and amygdala. Increased reactive oxygen species and reduced antioxidant capacity have been observed in individuals with conduct problems and aggressive behaviors. Oxidative stress can dysregulate neurotransmitters systems, including dopamine and serotonin, which modulate impulsivity and aggression. DNA methylation alterations have been implicated in conduct problems and impulsive traits. Studies have shown that this is one of the differentiation factors, methylation in gene involved stress regulation, NR3C1, KFPP5, and the neurotransmission of MAOA, SLC6A4 in youth, exhibiting conduct disorder symptoms. Methylation changes in MAOA, a key gene regulating monoamine neurotransmitters, have been linked to aggression and impulsivity, especially in the context of early life adversity. Epigenetic modifications can mediate the long-term effect of childhood maltreatment and environmental stressors and behavior. Attachment theory provides a framework for understanding how early relationships experiences influence impulsivity and antisocial conduct. Insecure and disorganized attachment styles correlate with poor emotional regulation, impulsivity, and increased risk for conduct problems. Early trauma and attachment disruption elevate oxidative stress and trigger epigenetic changes, potentially altering neurodevelopmental trajectories linked to impulsivity. Dysregulated oxytocin receptor gene methylation, or OXTR, may impair social bonding, that is needs for understanding intrapersonal and interpersonal. So there is poor social skills. There is poor social skills and poor social interaction and no boundaries. They don't understand boundaries, and or the it's cognitively is not processed. So it needs like adaptation modulation for that. And that through presenting new scenarios, no storytelling of what socially accepted as and what healthy social conduct is. If you don't know it, if you don't live it, how you come you know it? How come you're asking somebody knows what you are talking, doesn't know what you are talking about? Their biological system is acting from complete different scenario. Their perception is different. Their memory is different. Their memory is altered due to the early stressors and early trauma. Contribute to antisocial traits, so it's become as a revenge. It become as a projection into harming. Or getting this reactivity from the target. Integrating epigenetics biomarkers and oxidative stress profiles could improve risk satisfaction and personalized intervention for conduct disorder and antisocial behaviors. Targeting oxidative stress through antioxidant therapies might complement behavioral and pharmacological treatments. Early psychological intervention that promotes secure attachment and stress reduction might mitigate epigenetic vulnerability. And I'd like we shift from management into reduction, because stress is going to still present itself. The biological system still have the establishment of maladaptive and survival mechanisms. So we'd like to understand from reduction and elimination. I hope we change this word management, because management always correlated with me is non-changeable. It's just controlling. It's another control. This is another environmental control. So let's understand more about the chicken and egg dilemma. What causes what? And when this started, this first or that first, or this first or it's like the we call it what? Going into the interterrestrial boundaries, which is like beyond. What do you think? According to this DSM-5, personality disorders and enduring patterns of behavior, cognition, and inner experience that deviate from culture expectations and cause significant distress or impairment. They are grouped in three clusters. Cluster A, other eccentric, paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal. Cluster B is dramatic, emotional, erratic, antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. So that is heavy. If you are, if you stated that it is a personality conflict, you are addressing a layer of the behavior. You have to go deep. Cluster C, anxious, fearful, avoidant, dependent, obsessive, compulsive. These categories reflect distinct, distinct behavioral phenotype, but all are shaped by interplay of neuroendocrine, attachment, environmental factors, and that what I call for and what I am looking for collaboration in understanding part of the chicken and egg dilemma in a specific in a specific like population illness and disorders. So how we never know what can lead to. HB axis dysfunction, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. HB axis regulates stress via cortisol release. Chronic HB dysregulation is implicated in various personality disorders. Cluster A, blunted HB responses, social withdrawal, and flattened affect resemble negative symptoms of schizophrenia. Cluster B, hyperactive HB axis, borderline antisocial traits show heightened cortisol reactivity and poor regulation. Cluster C, elevated baseline cortisol, heightened anticipatory anxiety and behavioral inhibition. Serotonin and 5-HT deficits linked to impulsivity and aggression, especially in cluster B. Dopamine dysregulated in cluster A, schizotypal ideation, and cluster B, narcissistic craving for stimulation. They are looking for their doll to play with. I call it their doll. The naivety, the easy to control, the sassy, the name it, guys. The gullible. This is their toy that feed on what they want, and it's all driven. It is all electrochemical driven. It is not something they are aware of. This is their metabolic function. Their body is doing, and their nerve function and structure is doing what they are supposed to do, but they are looking for what they feed on from the others, from the 20% vulnerable and 60% female gender. Cytokines, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, chronic low-grade inflammation contributes to mood dysregulation and impulsivity, seen in borderline and avoidant phenotypes. For attachment for attachment insecurities is a critical and in developmental risk for personality disorders, because the predisposition, the environmental, the experience, the interpersonal relationships, all of this, dismissive, avoidant, emotional detachment, mistrust, disorganized, fearful, chaotic behavior, poor self-other boundaries, anxious, preoccupied dependency, fear, abandonment. This is cluster A, my apology, cluster A, dismissive, avoidant, emotional detachment, distrust or mistrust. Cluster B, disorganized, fearful, chaotic. You see people suspicious all the time, like, they are in this like restless state of activation. Chaotic behavior, poor self other boundaries. There is poor boundaries, and cluster B is really severe if it comes really dangerous in stalking, because they take the rejection, they take the no inflicted on themselves as the end of the world. So they have to bring the deepest self harm onto the target, or they are and mostly from social rejection. And even they didn't know the person, but the no for them is not taking positively or respect or emotional maturity. It creates a whole pattern of disruptive behavior, especially in stalking, unfortunately. Anxious, preoccupied dependency, and that's causing like the fear, the traumatized, and that is the internal inflection. And unfortunately, no law or justice system has a profound identification or tapestry that what is invisible stays invisible until the 99% are presented. And here we deal with the outcomes, not prevention. Cluster C, anxious, preoccupied, dependency, fear of abandonment, and that's what the perpetrator looks for. The distracted, the preoccupied, the dependent, the fear of being left alone. That's what they are looking for. Cluster A, there is not too much harm, but they cause harm to themselves more. Yeah, they are running from different scenario, and this needs more like insights on that. But the highest are for the disruptive behavior and conducted disorders. Cluster B and C are the heightened. In yeah, from 7 years old. Adverse childhood experiences modify HB axis activity and gene expression through epigenetic mechanisms, NR3C1 methylation, increasing personality disorder vulnerability. Through childhood, emotional dysregulation, reactive aggression, social withdrawal, adolescence risk-taking, and I talked about risk-taking hypothesis, and not everyone, and this is all a whole assessment and school of understanding the risk-taking from intention and motivation. Unstable identity, interpersonal conflict, adulthood, they are behavior seeking. So they are looking for conflict. They are looking for disruption. They are looking for harm because that's what drives or bring them this dopamine rush on other electrochemical to feel they are feeling good. Adulthood trait, but they never feel good. Adulthood trait crystallization, chronic interpersonal dysfunction. Older adults decrease the symptoms of intensity in cluster B, increase the social withdrawal in cluster A, and health anxiety in cluster C. Epigenetics, FKBP5 gene polymorphisms interact with the childhood trauma to amplify stress sensitivity and emotional stability in cluster personality B, in cluster B personality. MOHAL variant predict aggression and antisocial traits, especially in adverse environment. OXTR, oxytocin receptors. Many say oxytocin, the feeling good, the bonding, but in aggression, it does as well, especially in male gender. Gene methylation linked to social detachment in cluster A. Brain structural networks, amygdala hyperactivity in cluster B, emotional dysregulation, reduced prefrontal cortex volume in cluster B and C, poor impulse control, default mood network, disconnectivity in cluster A, social cognition deficits. So what comes first? What comes first? Biology or behavior? Or they come together? Or they predict each other? I don't know. So let us see. So this debate for the chicken and egg. Is it your gene or is it what you do? What it is? Neurobiological vulnerabilities cause maladaptive traits. That is bottom-up approach. So we take from early from 10 weeks of neural tube. Or maladaptive social attachment experiences shape the brain. That is the top down. This is a cognitive approach. So we have the downstream. This is the pathophysiology. And we have the top down. This is the cognitive approach. What goes why? It is a bidirectional model or transactional framework. This is a transactional theory in health theories. It's a pattern used by practitioners and us. So we take all the theoretical framework in perspective because it gives us constructs to work through, and then we see the variables, the dependent and independent and confounding variables, and the subtraits and the traits, and we take the originality of the narrative. The originality, how can it present this originality, how it present itself, and the narrative is not it's another, it's patterns, clusters, is context based, so it is dynamic. Early diversity, neglect, abuse sensitizes the HB axis. This leads to neuroendocrine and epigenetic changes that predispose to maladaptive interpersonal patterns. Chronic stress behaviors reinforce biological dysregulation. Understanding the reciprocal relationship between the biology and the behavior informs trauma-informed care, early intervention programs, biopsychosocial treatment models for BPD. In DSM-5 criteria for BPD, significant impairment in self and interpersonal function, traits as pervasive, inflexible, and stable over time, not better explained by other mental disorders or psychological effects. Categorical versus dimensional debate, poor across culture validity, lacks integration of biological marker, epigenetic lifespan perspective. So these are the limitations of the approach of that top-down approach. So it's only focusing on cognition. It's only focusing on the neurochemical imbalances. But what drives the biological markers, the epigenetic, the phenotype, the gene environment interaction, the lifespan, especially during a sensitive period of development. This is a limitation of the approach in DSM-5. Alternative DSM-5 Section 3 model emphasize trait domains, negative affectivity, detachment, and disinhibition. Yes, and all these like, okay, but what drives? Again, what drives? Opens the door for neurobiological and genetic integration. And that's what it stands for. So the neurobiology of suicide and behavior and self-harm, the neurobiology of trauma, the neurobiology of all of things. I have to take the neurobiology from biopsychosocial model, from the human ecological model, and other health theories and perspective from behavior neuroscience, from psychoneuroimmunology, even from epidemiology. So epidemiology was one as well. I took one semester in that. So it's a lot of things like from healthcare management. So everything, it has blocks. It has blocks, but how can we facilitate these blocks within a complex environment, cross culture, and from culture intelligence? That what needs a whole new perspective and how to understand the molecular and cellular mechanisms of the condition. The development and manifestation of cluster A, B, C personality disorders are rooted in complex interplay between neuroendocrine pathway, HB axis, serotonin inflammation, attachment disruption across early life, epigenetic regulation, stress response genes, phenotypic expression across developmental stages. So the chicken and egg dilemma is best resolved by embracing the biopsychosocial model and transactional model, where biological risk factors and early social experiences co-evolve to shape personality pathology. Because we are social beings. We are social beings. Humans are not created to live on their own or to do things on their own. No, we are social beings. However, with the complex modern environment, with the diverse tapestry of population, the neurobiology of the personality, it plays a heavy part in behavior, in either in good and a bad, from the perpetrator, the aggressor, and the victim or the target. It brings us to, okay, what in play other than say I treat you by your sex, gender, race, ethnicity, because, and this is stereotyping of the behavior, and you take whole nation or her gender or her sex as one stampa. You belong to this, so you are, and you bringing this your heuristic memory, this familiar, this relevant, this comfort zone of justification and decision making, but not considering all the factors that taking place, that every individual has a specific tapestry. So we have to integrate attachment patterns, lived experience, neurodevelopmental factors during sensitive periods, environmental influences, intra and interpersonal relationships, substance use, quality of life, identification of attachment-based patterns. As all of this has to be considered and has to be like from multidisciplinary approach with neuroimaging, with lab work, with the lifestyle changes, with the all types of modulation to the homeostasis or the biological systems. Cluster B, and I focus today on cluster B personality disorder because these are the high vulnerable sector. They can cause harm either from the side of aggressor or target. Either side, they're going to cause harm. They can do that. They are taking everything that is happening to them as a tool to deflect on others, or to inflict, not deflect, inflict. So it's like the elephant in the room. So cluster B personality disorders, they are our elephant in the room. They can exist in any environment. You're seeing the person now. You don't take their life history, inventory, or medical history, or diagnostic. You're seeing a whole being in front of you. But what is inside the box? That can be an eye-opening for every single female that are falling into the category of subjective vulnerability, and the 60% of vulnerable females that can be used and taken advantage for their what they prefer, what they present to the aggressor to feed on. This is the elephant in the room, and it can impact life, it can impact work, it can impact communities, societies, and everyone touched by this cluster P. And without awareness, without educating, without being informed, without being aware of what's going on, and taking from the stereotyping, I see this outside, how they wear, how they look, how they, and where they come from, or where they live, or this, and I have a schema for ready to draw conclusion, but you never know what else is there, unless and especially there is when there a sudden trust, the blind, I call it blind trust, with the environment, with interactions or relationships, with communication, the blind trust, but you don't know what is inside the box. And this is what the lived experiences present, whether you are in the 20% vulnerable or you are on the aggressor or perpetrator. And it can be subtle and it can be everyday behavior, but it takes from cross culture or from culture norms promotion, that this is the strengths, how they present their control strengths and their dominance over where they are. So that is the elephant in the room. If you would like to adjust the policies, the guidelines, regulations, we have to focus on this very tricky cluster of personality disorders. And that is cluster B, personality disorders, borderline, narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial. And that's when you see homicide, domestic violence, you see suicide, you see substance use heavily, you see highly toxic relationships, multiple partners, multiple relationships, and all goes into the realm of vicious cycle. And unfortunately, the offsprings pay the price. Unfortunately. It's a heavy load, and it requires a different way. Identify your what you want to work on, and educate, inform, reach out to those who think that they got it all. No one got it all. Cluster B, personality disorder, I said borderline, narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial, are characterized by emotional dysregulation, impulsivity, interpersonal instability, and identity disturbances. From an attachment theory perspective, these disorders often reflect early disruptions in caregiver relationships, which shapes self-regulation, empathy, and relational patterns across the lifespan. Research consistently shows high rates in secure, anxious, and avoidant, and disorganized attachment in individuals with cluster B features. Anxious, preoccupied, borderline, fear or abandonment, emotional vitality. There is a swing, there is no stability in the mood. One moment they are this, and the other, today they are this, and tomorrow the others. They bring a confusion with their activity. Dismissive, avoidant, narcissistic, emotional distancing, need for control. Narcissistic ghosting, and all the psychologists, they say that narcissistic personality, there is no cure for it. You don't even see it. So if you don't see it, if you don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist for you. So why I have to listen to you? They get what they want. They be what they want. They have the control. They feed on what they want. So I'm good. What are you talking about? They are the problem. Disorganized, borderline, and antisocial, chaotic behavior, identity diffusion, fear, rage cycles. These attachment patterns emerge in response to inconsistent, rejecting, neglectful, or abusive caregiving, particularly in sensitive period of neurodevelopmental. During the first 3 to 5, and the health of the child depends on the socioeconomic status of the mother from 0 to 5. During the first 3 to 5 years of life, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and anterior cingulate cortex, involved in emotional regulation and interpersonal attunement, undergo rapid development and are highly responsive to relation stimuli. They would like to belong or connect, the bonding. Adverse experiences during these periods leads to HB axis dysregulation, chronic stress, amygdala hyperactivity, threat sensitivity, reduced prefrontal cortex, impulsivity, and emotion dysregulation. These neurobiological changes form the emotional and behavioral core of cluster B disorder. Trauma, neglect, household instability, and parental psychopathology. As I say, subjective vulnerability, the majority, they are away from their family. They, uh, they, they try to isolate them from any source of positive support. So they dismantle the target. They dismantle them. So who is going to show up in front of them? Only the perpetrator and the aggressor, and they're going to be seen as a savior at this time. And unfortunately, once the trust is being has been, or the mask fall down, unfortunately, this betrayal, sense of betrayal, never go away with trauma, neglect, and instability pattern, and parental psychopathology. Particularly, borderline and narcissistic caregivers significantly increase risk of cluster B traits. Lived experiences shape emotional schemas. I am unlovable. I am unwanted. I am bad. I am hateful. I am, but it's all negative connotation. So this is a self-infliction coming back to the inner wounded child instead of seeing what orchestrate in place, because they lack the understanding, they lack the language to express all of this. So they self-infect and self-project onto themselves. Later on, they can project onto others if the psychological pain or unresolved trauma within as not they seek it into projecting onto others. Defensive relational styles, clinging, rejecting, seducing, devaluing. Some started to use seduction as revenge. So that is if we understand it, you see like the chameleon change of behavior and the tactics and strategies and the adaptive and coping mechanisms, it's all toxic. But however, they are using it to project onto those who see, wow, oh, poor you. So here I come. So unfortunately, this dynamic is subtle, and we see it on multiple of the volatile interpersonal relationships. Once they break up, or once there's a breakup or separation, it is not tolerated. They are gonna see like the whole drastic other, the mask fall off, and you see all this traumatized, the rupture of the or the humanization of the person themselves. And the more they are disarmed, isolated, being seen as they are the problem, the more they are going to give space to the perpetrator to orchestrate. And unfortunately, it is not being handled from prevention. It is handled from we are dealing with a case now. The harm is done. we are dealing, and then we go back to what happened. Children exposed to emotional invalidation or role reversal often develop maladaptive strategies to secure attention, such as dramatic expression, manipulation, and hostility. Attachment disruption manifests as identity instability, especially in borderline personality disorder, excessive need for admiration, narcissistic personality disorder, manipulative or aggressive tactics to regulate intimacy, histrionic and antisocial personality disorder. They can use their relationships for this maneuver of their toxic tendencies. Individuals struggle with mentalizing, understanding others' perspectives. It is all about them. It is all about what harm has been done to them, and they have to take revenge. How? With whatever tool is presented to them. Emotional attunement struggle with it. So there is no attenuation, connection, genuine connection. When you see in healthy lifestyle, there is genuine, there is comfort and ease. If you feel uncomfortable in the presence of someone or a group or a community, trust your feelings. That is true. Your guts is telling you something is off or something is not right. Trust it. And don't ignore this feeling. Don't ignore it. Consistent boundaries. Relationships are often marked by cycle of idealization, devaluation, and abandonment fears. Most of the victims or the target, no one believed them. Everyone say they are. Uh, Something is going on and stable with them, so they are being stigmatized and labeled. It became overwhelming for anyone to deal with, but unfortunately the what we say, the strategic manipulation is taking place. It is subtle, it is long, it is calculated, so it is not seen until the damage already everybody can see by their eyes and say, oh, sorry, I didn't believe you from the beginning. So, and sorry, at this time, it has no place. Apology has no place, meaningless, it is vague, it is emotionless. It's one of the callous, you can say sorry, but you don't feel the word. Unresolved attachment trauma often leads to substance use as a form of self-medication. So some with their central nervous system overwhelmed, especially in the sensitive developmental stages, they cannot take this all. They don't know why their body. So whatever solution is going to present it to them, they are going to take it in because it's feel good first time, and then unfortunately they don't know the down journey of this if they don't seek help. Borderline to numb emotional pain and manage abandonment fears, antisocial to enhance stimulation or assert power, histrionic narcissistic to reduce social anxiety or elevate self-image. This is all maladaptive. This behavior reinforces impulsivity and worsen emotional regulation, often contributing to comorbid substance use disorders or SUDs. Cluster B, personality disorders, particularly borderline and antisocial, are linked with lower occupational stability, higher rate of relationship conflict, divorce, and legal issues, increased suicide risk, especially in borderline personality disorders, chronic emptiness, shame, and met emotional needs, despite outward expressiveness. Another thing it can correlate is eating disorders and self-harm. That is because they are seeking comfort in a source that may allow them escape the sense of feeling of shame, guilt, and fear. Quality of life is further diminished when early trauma is unprocessed. So everyone has a carry a load of trauma, but there are unresolved. If it's not addressed, if it's not acknowledged, it's gonna keep harm you and harm others. And the relational strategies remains maladaptive. So, for the detachment informed patterns evaluation, for the narratives, stories of abandonment, idealization, devaluation, relational behavior, intensity, boundaries violation, fear of closeness, emotion regulation, sudden mood shifts, impulsivity, self harm, defense mechanisms, splitting, projecting, acting out, history, early loss, neglect, abuse, a caregiven role reversal. So that is part of, you see a change in the imbalance in the power dynamic, and the imbalance in you see the shift in the balance of interpersonal relationships, communication, connectedness, and how they approach their lives, or how they present themselves. So there is instability of the behavior. A structure tool at adult attachment interview, experience in close relationship scale, personality assessment inventory, a structured clinical interview of DSM-5 personality disorder, or SSCID-5-PD, therapeutic approaches such as mentalization-based therapy, MBT, and transferase-focused psychotherapy, TFP, specifically target these patterns through the lens of attachment. The attachment foundations of cluster B personality disorders offers a powerful lens of understand their development trajectory, neurobiological roots, and psychosocial consequences. These individuals often have early disrupted attachment, neurodevelopmental changes in validation and unmet needs, difficulties with interpersonal boundaries, empathy, and self-coherence, poor coping strategies, substance use that further reduce quality of life, and I'm saying is like food addiction, eating disorders, self-harm. It's all from disorganized, insecure attachment. Identifying these attachment-based patterns allow clinicians to implement a more empathetic, trauma-informed, and developmentally appropriate intervention. So the early onset of cluster B personality disorder. So when is the first onset? Cluster B personality disorders, particularly borderline personality disorders, or BPD, and the antisocial personality disorder, often manifest during adolescence and early adulthood. This early onset coincides with critical neurodevelopmental periods involving emotion regulation, identifying formation, and executive function maturation. Early symptoms may precede or exacerbate by adverse childhood experiences, including trauma, neglect, unstable caregiving. Sensitive periods in brain development, especially in the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, are vulnerable to disruption, contributing to dysregulated affect, emotions, and impulsivity. There is an increased prevalence in chronic physical illness in cluster B. Individuals with cluster B personality disorders show higher rate in chronic medical conditions compared to the general population: cardiovascular disease, diabetes mellitus, chronic pain syndrome, gastrointestinal disorder. Due to poor health behaviors, substance use, risky sexual behavior, dysregulated stress response impacting immune and metabolic response, higher rates of trauma and somatization. Chronic illness during formative years can increase psychological distress and emotional dysregulation, trigger or exacerbate maladaptive coping pattern typical of cluster B, like impulsivity, emotional outbursts, contribute to social isolation, impaired interpersonal functioning, reinforcing personality disorder symptoms. HB axis the dysregulation in cluster B personality disorder contribute to chronic inflammation and altered immune functioning, mediating the link to chronic illness. Epigenetic changes due to early stress affect both mental and physical health trajectories. Attachment disruption exacerbates stress vulnerability, influencing disease onset and progression. Early screening for personality disorders symptoms in youth with chronic illness is critical. Integrating care models addressing both mental and medical needs improve outcomes. Trauma-informed intervention can mitigate long-term risks in both personality disorder progression and chronic disease burden. There are some clinical guidelines proposed to provide clinicians with an evidence-based framework. For example, early identification of cluster B personality disorders in patients with chronic illness and early onset symptoms, integrated assessment strategies addressing both mental health and physical comorbidities, tailored treatment plans to improve outcomes and quality of life, target population, adolescents and adults presenting with symptoms consistent with cluster B personality disorder, borderline, antisocial, histrionic, narcissistic BD, patient with co-occurring chronic medical conditions, cardiovascular, diabetes, and chronic pain, individuals with a history of early onset personality pathology and or adverse childhood experiences. Utilize standardized BD screening tools such as Personality Diagnostic Questionnaire 4 or BDQ4 Plus, McLean Screening Instrument for Borderline Personality Disorder or MSIBBD, screen for chronic medical illness with relevant history, physical exam and labs. Comprehensive assessment requires perform structured clinical interviews for DSM-5 personality disorders, evaluate trauma and attachment history using adult attachment interview, trauma screening tools, adverse childhood experiences questionnaire, assess substance use via standardized instrument, audit or DAST, monitor neuroendocrine and inflammatory markers where applicable, like cortisol level or C-reactive protein. Differentiate cluster B symptoms from mood disorders and other psychiatric comorbidities. Recognize early onset symptoms manifesting as emotional instability, impulsivity, interpersonal difficulties. Evaluate for chronic illness, impact on psychological state, vice versa. The chicken and egg. Psychotherapeutic interventions prioritize trauma-informed attachment-focused therapies, mentalization-based treatment, dialectical behavior therapy, transferase-focused psychotherapy. Address emotional regulation, interpersonal skills, and identity coherence. Collaborate with primary care and specialists to optimize chronic illness management. Monitor and manage psychotropic medications effect on physical health, address lifestyle factors, smoking cessation, diet, and exercise. Integrate motivational interviewing and relapse preventing. Provide access to addiction services as needed. Educate patients and families about the interplay between personality trauma and chronic illness. Encourage adherence to treatment plans. Regulatory access symptoms, severity, and functional impairment, using validated scales for monitoring and follow up. For borderline symptoms list, global assessment of functioning, monitor medical comorbidities closely for complications or exacerbations, reassess attachment and trauma related issues periodically to inform treatment adjustment. Coordinating care between psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, primary care physicians, social workers, and case managers. Facilitate communication to manage complex presentation effectively. Early intervention during adolescence to improve prognosis, address stigma associated with personality disorders and chronic illness, tailor intervention to culture and social economical context. And when you apply this culture and social context, and within that framework of ancestral behavioral medicine, see what your ancestors are doing and try to take adapt some of their traditions into your lifestyle, because your DNA is talking to this. Early ancest cluster personality personality disorder frequently co-occur with chronic illness, amplifying morbidity, and that is our elephant in the room. That is the personality conflict everywhere. It's not considered personality conflict. It is pathological conflict of what systems are you operating from, and what unresolved issues are still persisting. Neurodevelopmental disruptions and adverse experiences underpin this correlation. Integrated trauma-informed and multidisciplinary care optimize outcomes. We have to look at the family patterns of dysfunctional attachment in families, and I said over 70% came from dysfunctional background. So we have something to do. We have work to do. Instead of labeling, stigmatizing, and throwing stones at each other, we all operating from a load needs to address. Inconsistent craving, alternating between neglect, over involvement, and unpredictability is common in families where cluster B personality disorder develops. Parental psychopathology, including cluster B traits or mood disorders, often models maladaptive emotional regulation and interpersonal styles. So, understand dysregulated adult, dysregulated child, dysregulated adult, dysregulated child. Role reversal and parentification are frequent, where the child is forced into caregiving role, leading to blurred boundaries and impaired identity development. There are missed milestones in development. So when we're dealing with intervention, we have to revisit these missed milestones, what happened in them, and alter the neuropathophysiology. Neglect to contribute to the missed milestones. People who didn't live their childhood, their adolescence, their early adulthood, and they took on alternative roles. So, because every stage has a specific, God designed for a specific mechanisms to take place. If they missed these milestones, so there is alteration. Neglect to contribute to emotional dysregulation, typical of cluster B personality disorders. Children often internalize maladaptive family dynamics, including poor emotion regulation strategies, difficulty trusting others, expectations of rejection or abandonment. This can perpetuate cycles of trauma, insecure attachment, and personality dysfunction across generations. high prevalence of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, as well as neglect in individuals with cluster B personality disorders. This is across their lived experience, early experiences of invalidating environments. Their emotions never been validated, where feelings and needs were dismissed or punished, impair self-soothing and emotional awareness. And then they fall for any maladaptive behavior that will soothe their discomfort or their confusion or their over state of overwhelm. Why me? And many came to a state to ask these questions. Why me? Individuals report abrasive sense of emptiness, abandonment, and instability in relationships. A struggle with trust, often oscillating between intense idealization or devaluation of caregivers and peers. These lived experiences shape core features of impulsivity, self-harm, and interpersonal conflicts. Clinicians should explore family histories, emphasizing quality of early caregiving, experiences of trauma or neglect, patterns of communication and emotional expression. Use clinical interviews and validate tools like a childhood trauma questionnaire, CTQ, and family environmental scare FES to quantify adversity in family dynamics. Recognize the impact of family of origin patterns to guide trauma-informed care. Consider family therapy or psychoeducation to address dysfunction patterns and improve relational functions. Support the patients in reconstructing coherent narrative around their lived experiences, aiding mentalization and emotional regulation, and guided imagery work well in that. And at the same time, we say don't take the patient and give them like they are in the inpatient care for a specific time, but you bring them back to the dysfunction, to the fire. And what do you think? 2 weeks, 3 months, even 1 year, it will not compensate the rupture has done on the cellular level. It takes time, it needs alternative systems. To provide clinicians with an evidence-based framework, early identification of cluster B personality disorders in patients with chronic illness and early onset symptoms is important to have an evidence-based framework too. Integrated assessment strategies addressing mental health, physical comorbidities, and family dynamics. Tailored treatment plans that consider biological, psychological, social, and familial influence. Adolescents and adults presenting with symptoms consistent with cluster B personality disorders, borderline, antisocial, histrionic, narcissistic personality disorders, and those cause havoc for our other clusters. Cause havoc. This don't underestimate the middle child. That's my joke now. So patients with co-occurring chronic medical conditions like cardiovascular diabetes, chronic pain. These are the targeted population. Individuals with early onset personality pathology and or adverse childhood or family experiences or lived experiences. Initial screening uses standardized personality disorder screening, personality disorder diagnostic questionnaire 4 plus, McLean screening instrument for borderline personality disorder, screen for chronic medical conditions through history, physical exam, and labs. A structured clinical interview for DSM-5 personality disorder, and adult attachment interview, adverse childhood experiences questionnaire, assess substance use through audit and DST, quantify family dynamic and lived experiences, childhood trauma questionnaire, family environmental scale, monitor neuroendocrine inflammatory markers as indicated, like cortisol, C-reactive protein, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are the master players of many symptoms. Family dysfunction, dysfunctional attachment characterized by inconsistent caregiving, neglect, and parental psychopathology. So they didn't get it from nowhere. There is a modeling from adult modeling of the outcomes. Role reversal, presentification, and blur the boundaries, impair, identify emotional regulation. Family environment often marked by conflict, invalidation, emotional neglect, intergenerational transmission of maladaptive relational patterns, perpetuates vulnerability to personality disorders. Lived experience, a high incidence of childhood trauma, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, early invalidation contributes to the difficulties in self-regulation and emotional awareness. Experience of emptiness, abandonment fears, unstable relationships is central to cluster B phenomenology. So identification, explore family history of caregiving quality, trauma, communication patterns in clinical interviews. Employ validated instruments like CTQ, FES to understand the lived experience and family environment. Incorporate trauma-informed care sensitive to family dynamics. It's a family-based now, community-based, because everyone knows what's happening exactly, what's taking place. It's not what you see. Consider this is the manifestation or the symptoms of what is taking place internally. Consider family therapy and psychoeducation to improve relation functioning. Support the patients in reconstructing coherent narrative to enhance mentalization and emotional regulation. Differentiate cluster B personality disorder from mood and other. So there is a rule out of diagnostic. Rule out mood disorders and other psychiatric disorders. Recognize early onset signs such as emotional stability, impulsivity, and interpersonal difficulties. Assess bidirectional impact of chronic illness and personality pathology. Trauma-informed and attachment-focused approaches, mentalization-based treatment, dialectical behavior therapy, and transference-focused psychotherapy. Coordinate with the primary, as I said, address lifestyle risk factors, substance use treatment, and encourage treatment adherence and coping strategies. Another factor, early identification is critical. Recognize early onset of the cluster B personality disorder, especially with patient with chronic medical illness to improve prognosis and quality of life. It needs multidisciplinary collaboration, coordinate care among mental health providers, medical specialists, social workers, and family members for holistic management. It requires ongoing monitoring, regularly assess symptom severity, functional status, and medical comorbidities, adjusting treatment plans as needed. Address stigma and promote psychoeducation, educate patients and families to foster understanding, reduce stigma, and encourage treatment adherence, because it's not mentally, it is physiopathology. It's what's taking place, what's the oxidization and the the alteration of the metabolic dysfunction. Target adolescents and sensitive developmental periods for preventive efforts. Okay, welcome to red flags, and I'd like to shed the lights on red flags. What would you like? Could you recognize some? Could you identify some? Have you experienced some of them? We call them for more severe or overt. They are severe or subtle. For antisocial conduct and impulsivity spectrum. Cognitive and emotional signs, lack of genuine remorse after causing harm. If they are laughing at the harm or the hurt has done, or the harm has done unto others, they are laughing, making fun of, cold, no response at all when everybody is questioning or, oh, how this happened, or whatever. Look for that. Planted affect, emotionally flat or indifferent, specifically when discussing harm to others. They don't care what happened to you. Sometimes it causes them a sense of entitlement that they need to know that. Why I need to know that? It's not my business. Why I wanna? Why you wanna me know that? So they show this planted effect. Rationalizing or justifying harmful behaviors. They deserve it. So this happened to them because they contributed to it. They deserve it. Low frustration tolerance and quick escalation over minor provocation. So whatever is presented unto them is hitting not only their ego, their pride, their public image. They are gonna take it to the extreme. So, but what happened unto others, it is nothing. They are acting out. A superficial charm or manipulation to gain advantage. And that is, you see it from the charismatic influencing. Lying for minor or unnecessary reasons, compulsive lying. Let us see. Interpersonal social cues, persistent blaming of others for personal mistakes or conflicts. Inconsistent relationships, intense but shallow or short-lived friendship. If you see them, they are all the time changing their friendship. No people all the time, no people. And they call them so fast friends. That's not friendship. And that is feeding on what they present. So if you notice that, that is a red flag, especially for short time. For short time, they have like the changing of their relationship. For example, their proximity to somebody or habitat with somebody. It's overchanging. It's overchanging. We don't fit, or we didn't agree on what we want or whatever. So, and it's consistent. It is consistent. It's consistent. That wasn't the right choice for me. They are. So look for that. It's a red flag. It's a red flag. Pattern of bullying and intimidation that's happened private or public. even in non-physical form, mocking, exclusion. So that happen especially, and it is high dominant among women, unfortunately. So that is the part of like the equation. 60% of the subjective vulnerability are female gender, and a pattern of bullying and intimidation highly among females, because that is the verbal, the emotional, and women are good with that. So but how to use it for the benefit or the opposite side, that is a masking, so you have to identify, or a red flag. Deceptiveness in social interactions, including feigned empathy or flattery. I have to fake it till I make it. So I have to show them that I am all empathetic, and or I flattering type of compliments, but that is for gaining control. A lack of loyalty and disregard of social norms within group settings. So you see that the betrayal among a group, the backstabbing, the gossiping, the mobbing, the bullying, and that what cause highly, not only mentally and traumatized, invisible metabolic dysfunction, it causes even suicide. So it can lead to the target to lose faith in everything, and they give their life away. But unfortunately, it is subtle, and it is considered okay, part of a socioculture promotion of strength or strong personality. Let us see. Chronic rule breaking in low risk settings in school, home curfews. Secretiveness about daily activities without clear reasons. Minor cruelty to animal or younger children, that is from early 2 years old, and that is from even if it is not overtly violent, minor cruelty, and that's, as I don't underestimate it, or toward the animals and younger children, so they look for their target from early. Destruction of property masked as accident or pranks. Impulsive, driven behavior without clear benefits, like stealing low value items or vandalism. Early fascinations with fire, weapons, or control power dynamics. Sudden behavioral shifts when caregivers change tone or roles, unusual calmness or smiling during serious consequences or conflict, disregard for safety rules or concern for consequences, early role of reversal with caregivers, controlling, dismissive toward parenting figures, aggressive play patterns or storytelling with violent themes, delayed empathy development compared to peers, to their peers, lack of guilt or discomfort after discipline, frequent boredom or risk-seeking behavior in a structured environment, instability to delay gratification even in simple tasks or games, disconnection from long-term consequences of their actions. These signs often appears before formal diagnostic criteria for conduct disorder or antisocial personality disorder are met. When seen consistently across settings, home, school, peers, especially in children with trauma, neglect, or insecure attachment histories, they may indicate trajectory toward the persistent behavioral problems if left under addressed. Um, other so what you should do if these red flags take place and you observe it, experience it, some of them. Initiate a full psychological assessment, including attachment, trauma, and family dynamics. Use screening tools, child behavior checklist, strengths and difficulties questionnaire, Connors 3. Refer to early psychological intervention focused on emotion regulation and empathy building. And that one where I state that coaching is more influencing and is more effective than psychological, because there is this negative connotation as well. You are going to be psychologically assessed from early age, so something wrong with you. So the alternative is the coaching based intervention. Coaching based, that seems like a positive adult mentoring and modeling, and navigating through the challenges from alternative parental model, when the dysfunctional family patterns are taking place. So I have the alternative coaching, intervention modeling can take place, and this can take like a longitudinal effect, because the coach is going to be seen as a teacher, or be as a welcomed adult that presents something. They are listened, heard to, and they understood, and they navigate through their challenges, which they don't have the right language for it. They are walking through this, and this collaboration in what you want to see, what you want to have or want to see taking place. And feedback. Engage family or caregivers in psychoeducation, behavioral management training. And it takes a village. It takes a village to it takes a village to do something good for everyone, based on their developmental stage, their that the context is given and where they are at. I would like to stop here now, and I hope you will benefit from this part, and I will continue on aggression, and I don't know what's next. So I wish you well, and thank you for tuning in. I am gonna put the I'm gonna put the playlist of the songs that, yeah, it is and then it is, so yeah, they give brings peace. Brings peace. Peace on earth. peacefulness, need peace, need like coherence, coherence. See what needs to be done, a lot to be done. I wish you peace and enjoy your day. Thank you.